Donald Trump's physical and cognitive health continued to rapidly deteriorate this week. International headlines reflected it as well. Trump cognitive decline continues as experts highlight new signs of trouble. NBC viewers embarrassed as Donald Trump brags about his cognitive test results. International Business Times, clown Donald Trump mocked for claiming cognitive test is challenging when the average 10-year-old would ace it, reads the International Business Times. I'll show you what Donald Trump was posting earlier this morning as well. He wrote, Rosie O'Donnell, wee wah wah or something. We lost. I don't know what the guy's writing here. Nobody realized, this is an official post from Trump's account. So after he was posting photoshopped images of former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama with their photoshopped faces on apes, he was posting this. Nobody realized that the crooked Democrat politicians of the Unselect Committee of Political Thugs, plus 2 Republicans, were worse than Democrats' wacky Liz Cheney. She's becoming like Rosie O'Donnell, the wee lass who is currently residing in Ireland in order to escape her Trump derangement syndrome, and crying Adam Kinzinger. Very strange behavior. Going back to that article about some of the experts, you had Caroline Aldwin, an aging researcher at Oregon State University, says that she's seeing even more fresh signs of decline from Donald Trump that she may not have even noticed before. Part of the decline is part of an already clear problem that Trump has severe language problems. And she added, he can't complete sentences. He wanders off topic. He gets very confused. He clearly has difficulties. How severe those are can really only be established by testing. And that's why he appears to be continuing to take these cognitive exams over and over again. I want to point this out as well, because we saw lots of additionally alarming behavior by Donald Trump when it comes to the cognitive and physical this week. He said that he avoids sleeping on planes because he likes to look out the windows to watch out for the missiles and the enemies. Here's what he says. Play this clip.
I don't have to sleep. I've been on a plane sleeping for 20. I'm sleeping on the plane. I don't sleep on planes. I don't like sleeping on planes, you know. I like looking out the window watching for missiles and enemies, actually.
And then in that interview with NBC, he started talking about ICE and how ICE murdered 2 American citizens, though he didn't talk about it that way. He said it was bad publicity, and that's what made him most upset, that it was bad PR. And then the host said, yeah, but it was 2 Americans who died. And then Donald Trump responded to the host saying 2 Americans died. What do you mean that it's bad PR? Trump said, we have the smallest trucks and we've been very tough on waters. And then the host says, the waters? What are you talking about? Here, play this clip right here.
It's bad. I hate it. I hate even talking about it. 2 people out of tens of thousands, okay? Mm-hmm. And you get bad publicity. Nobody talks about all of the murderers that were taken out of our country. They don't talk about...
but it was 2 Americans.
They don't talk about we have the smallest trucks. As an example, we've been very tough on the waters, and soon, pretty much overall. But if you look at the waters where we knock out boats.
And then Donald Trump kept on telling the reporter about, I do cognitive tests. I do the cognitive tests. Here, play this clip.
I feel great. I mean, physically and mentally, I feel like I did 50 years ago. It's crazy. Now, there'll be a time when I won't be able to give you that answer. But that time hasn't come, I do. I think it's very important. I've done more physicals. I take physicals just to give the report out.
Yeah.
I take cognitive physicals. So I do a cognitive mind test, okay? And a lot of people wouldn't be able to do very well. Not easy. You get to those last questions. I've aced. I've done 3 of them. No other president has agreed to do them. I do them because I have no problem with it because I'm 100%.
I think it's also notable too. We know that Donald Trump wants to put his name on everything, but it's also the pace at which he's putting his name on everything and the fear that people are saying that when he's gone, his name won't be out there? I mean, do they know something that we don't know? I'll show you. You had that guy, Scott Jennings, who's one of Donald Trump's top propagandists, who's saying, of course, Donald Trump should be able to shake down senators and withhold funding for critical infrastructure projects in states unless they name airports and train stations after Donald Trump, because when Donald Trump's gone, he can't trust them that they're going to put his name on these things. This is actually what Donald Trump has his sycophants out there telling people. Here, let's just play this clip.
You could not possibly trust, if you were Donald Trump, knowing everything you've been through, you could not possibly trust to posterity somebody doing you right, knowing full well they're going to do you dirty. He's got to do it to them now.
I can't believe you're actually defending this one. I can't believe this is real. I honestly, I read. It is. I thought, I'm with you. I thought this was a joke.
What's wrong with it?
What's wrong with him demanding certain things in exchange for naming it after him? You don't think that that's kind of bonkers?
I'm just telling you, if left to history and posterity, someone will always do this man dirty. He's got to take care of himself.
Is that not a reflection of his presidency? If anything, his reputation and legacy being left.
If left to people like Dan, he would never get anything.
So the people who come after, generations like mine, if he leaves a poor reflection, if he leaves a poor legacy, that's his own doing.
Yes.
You don't get a thing. But you would never give a fair, like if you were in Congress, you ran for Congress.
Don't get a participation.
No,
go to what state he won. Get a participation
and name something there.
For being president of the United States.
He's a two-term president.
Hold on a second.
He's going to get something.
Presidents leave legacies. Their legacies determine whether or not people will want to honor them. If you're seeming to acknowledge that people will not want to honor Donald Trump when he leaves the presidency.
And that says more about him.
I'm acknowledging reality. People crap on him while he's alive. What do you think they're going to do to him when he's dead? So here's the thing.
Well,
they would never allow this.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah, and so he wants to name Dulles Airport, Trump Dulles Airport. He wants to name Penn Station, Trump Penn Station. Like a very strange behavior right there. I want to bring in this interview I just did with Ben Terris. Ben Terris, of course, is the reporter over at New York Magazine, who wrote that incredible expose on Trump's health. He met with Trump. He met with the people in the Oval Office. And he gives me some incredible insights. I just interviewed him earlier. Let me bring in that interview that I did. Here, play this interview. I just did this interview with Ben. It's great. I want to bring in Ben Terris, reporter from New York Magazine, the author of The Superhuman President, a Good Faith Attempt to Ascertain the Truth About Donald Trump's Health. I'm sure you all read this article by now. We covered it here on the MeidasTouch network. Ben was granted access into the White House, where the focus of the interview was on Donald Trump's health. But as I pulled back from the interview, Ben, it was also to me a story about the health of the presidency in general, as Donald Trump's approval is tanking. And the same way he tries to project that his health is great and everything's amazing when we see the bruises on his hands and the incoherent speech, he does the same thing with the economy. $18 trillion and everything's amazing and this is the greatest thing ever. And the people aren't buying it anymore. So I want to tie it all together. But why don't we just start, though, with the health aspect of it, which I've always been saying on the MeidasTouch podcast, that this should be one of the biggest stories, as with the Epstein files, as with other things that are finally coming into focus. But it seems with Trump's health, it's so obvious. It is so bad what we're seeing physically with the way his body looks, the way he's talking, yet to me, it doesn't get anywhere near the attention that we've seen in other situations. So talk to us, though, about, why you think this is a big deal, though, why it was important for you to cover and why you think people should care about this.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. Honestly, it's a big story because it has to be a big story. This is an almost 80-year-old man who's leading this country. We've seen with our own eyes plenty of signs that he's not, as he says, the healthiest man alive. The bruising you mentioned, swollen cankles, seeming to nod off in meetings, bandages on the back of his hands. It's important to make sure on a regular basis that the person in charge, the most powerful man in the entire world, to make sure that he's doing well, both cognitively and physically. And so when I set out to write this story in December, the question was, is he okay? It's very hard to get to the bottom of that. And like you said, here's a man who for a long time has been able to tell people, don't believe what you're seeing with your own eyes. And with his health and with other issues, people are seeing such signs of, distress. I mean, you look at what happened in Minneapolis. He talks about how immigration is going perfectly smoothly, and clearly it's not. He's sort of losing control of his own personal narrative here. And I think that the health is a very good example of that, where he really, truly wants you to believe that he's superhuman. He's sending out all of his men to tell me that he's superhuman. He's going on television himself to talk about it. And we just see with our own eyes that, he may be struggling in ways that he's not ready to admit.
Right. And as with the well-being of our country, the explanations about the well-being of himself are so utterly absurd that maybe that's the reason that he gets away with it, because the mind doesn't even process the words because it's so absurd. So the reaction is just to reject it and say, I'm just going to focus on just something else, because, he'll say, the bruising and the discoloration, handshakes. Well, what about on the other hand? Oh, well, I hit a table. It goes from an MRI to a CT scan to it's just of the abdominal area. And you speak to anyone in the medical profession, they're like, we have no preventative abdominal MRIs or even CT scans. What are you talking about? They go, we release the medical reports and the records. And it's like, that's not a medical report. It's your doctors saying that you're a good golfer and saying that you weigh like 218 and you're 6'4". Like you aren't that. Like, you don't, and then the bragging about, I took the cognitive exam. It's a cognitive exam, another cognitive. It's like, why are you talking? You observed it in person. We see it on TV. And you described how these doctors around him are like, yes, sir, you're doing amazing, sir. Like the whole thing is weird. Like it's some weird stuff, Ben.
Yeah, it was a very strange experience. I went to the Oval Office for this story, expected just to be talking to President Trump. In fact, when I started reporting the story, I didn't expect to talk to him at all. I didn't think he'd want to speak to me, but he made it known to his people that he wanted to defend the record of his health. And when I got to the Oval Office, there were two men that were standing next to a Christmas tree. This is late December. And they were holding pieces of paper that on top said talking points. I'm not sure I was supposed to see that, but it's my job to see things like that. And these turned out to be his doctors from Walter Reed. And the whole experience is very surreal, right? Because you'd like to believe, if you're talking to two doctors from Walter Reed, whose responsibility is to look after the president, that they'll tell it to you straight. But if you're holding talking points, if you're saying things like they said to me about how Donald Trump is healthier than President Barack Obama was when he was in the White House, it's just hard to believe. And so am I able to get to the bottom of exactly how healthy or unhealthy Donald Trump is in my article? No, it's impossible to know. He knows, or maybe he knows. His doctors know. But nobody is necessarily going to be able to tell me the honest truth, because their job in this moment is not to tell the truth necessarily. It's to say the things that Donald Trump wants them to say. Were they lying to me? I don't know. But they certainly had the president of the United States looking across the Resolute desk at them when I was asking questions of them about his health, and they were answering for both of us. And so I kind of left this experience, not perfectly sure about how Donald Trump's health is, but I did have a pretty good window into the health of the presidency, to how Donald Trump operates, to how he gets people around him to say what he wants them to say, this kind of control he's able to maintain over his inner circle, and kind of the lack of control he has in being able to convince people out in the broader public that, things are as he wants them to be.
Right. Let's get into that, because and this is how we'll do it. On the periphery of your story, you have these vignettes, like Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who told you, or you learned through the reporting, he puts towels or blankets over his head when he's sleeping, on Air Force One or when he's around Trump, because sleeping at night, when people sleep, he says would be viewed as a sign of weakness, essentially. So he hides that he sleeps because the lore is that Donald Trump never sleeps. Now, this is the Secretary of State, one of the most powerful positions, and he's out there acting like a maltreated intern from 2002.
Yeah, I mean, he basically is saying that he's hiding from an almost 80-year-old man every time he goes on an airplane with him because he doesn't want to be caught sleeping. I've described this to people. The experience of reporting this story was sort of like sitting for a series of plays where I was the only member of the audience, where they were putting on these shows just for me. Shows, Marco Rubio took time out of his very busy schedule. He's like the busiest man in Washington. He's got 50 jobs or whatever. And he took time out of his day to sit with me in the White House and talk about how he can't even keep up with this 80-year-old man, this almost 80-year-old man. He, hides from him on the airplane when he's sleeping. His memory isn't nearly as good as the president's. And this was just one of many conversations that went exactly like this. I talked to all sorts of people from Trump's inner circle who would say, I can't keep up with him. My dad is the same age and my dad could never do what he does. I couldn't do what he does. Stephen Miller told me if I was going to write an honest story, the headline had to be "The Superhuman President," which we then used as the headline, juxtapose it with a picture of Donald Trump stumbling up the stairs and looking, pretty old. Take that how you want it. But it was just a bunch of people doing this kind of dear leader, almost North Korea-like, this man is perfect and we're all just in awe to be in his presence.
Yeah, I think about the dear leader moments. I think about the movie, the Sacha Baron Cohen movie, The Emperor, or whatever that movie was called, and I see it here. And what's your takeaway though about why he has that level of control? I mean, Rubio was someone who was very critical of Trump. People like Ted Cruz were, and I understand perhaps that Donald Trump has tapped into the reptilian minds of a constituency that these other people need. Rubio obviously is going to run for president. I mean, on the horizon, there's going to be a Rubio JD Vance thing in 20. They're planning on that, so they need is it just all about power and Trump's ability to have tapped into this portion of America through the manipulation and the promises that are now being exposed, and the Republican base says we need that. That's it's like the superhero movies with the villains, and then there's that force that they just need to be around. And then what is it? I mean, I'm giving a stupid explanation. What do you think it is? You've been around them.
I think it's a number of things. I think for sure a big part of it is there's no penalty in the Republican Party for being over the top with your praise for Donald Trump, and there's plenty of reason that you can be more successful if you do that. If you want to be the next president of the United States, you kind of need Donald Trump's coalition. You kind of need Donald Trump's support. And if you're vying for that kind of power, then it helps your cause to talk to me and say, this man is perfect. Because if Donald Trump reads it, he goes, oh, that was really nice of Marco Rubio to say, I like this guy. I also think that everybody who's around the White House, in the administration, they all have their own objectives that they're trying to accomplish. And sometimes they feel like if they play the game that they need to play, they're more likely to be able to accomplish what they want to accomplish. They have more room to, do their own side projects that Donald Trump doesn't necessarily care about. I also do think there's a chance that they believe this to a degree. Are they speaking in hyperbolic language? Yeah, probably. But do they believe that Donald Trump is incredibly healthy for a 79-year-old man? Is he difficult to keep up with? Does he call them at 1 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning? Does he never sleep on airplanes? I mean, there might be some truth to that, right? Donald Trump has proven that he is relatively healthy in certain ways, that he is able to stand up and do these long rallies that, I frankly probably couldn't do. I got 2 kids at home. I'm tired all the time. I probably couldn't keep up with them in certain ways. And so it's a combination of there being some truth and that the hyperbole, is beneficial to their own political futures.
Right. But when you and I are doing this interview during the day, and you have to listen to the moment he has to listen to somebody else, the guy falls asleep, right? And so we've seen those moments publicly, but you're right. I mean, he does give long rambling speeches where they last long, but also if you went into a nursing home and you saw people speaking for 3 hours in tongues, that's not a sign of strength. It's just a sign of that the time started at this time and the time ended at that time. Because when you go, let's talk about that though, because when you hear these rallies or whatever he's even doing now, the one recently in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Iowa, it's incoherent speech. Like we're not getting full sentence structures with beginning, middle, and end. It's just words. And then see you later. And then you hear the people around Trump saying, oh, that was really brilliant. He really rolled out the economic agenda. And there are so many Americans the same way you felt. Are you doing a bit like for me? There's so many people like, what the F did I just watch? And why are people validating this behavior? Like, what the hell is this?
Donald Trump is out there so often saying so many things that anyone who has a prior belief about him can find moments that prove their priors. And sometimes it's the same moment that can prove multiple priors, right? Like if Donald Trump wakes up at 5 a.m. and sends out 5,000, kind of deranged truth posts, you could say, man, this guy is not well. Like clearly there's something going on with his mind that he's, kind of unhinged. And another person could say, wow, this guy's already up at 5 a.m. and he's doing work. I mean, this is the problem with him. And this is sort of his superpower in a way, is that he gives people so much of himself. He's out in front of cameras all the time. He's doing these rallies. He's, doing press availabilities and gaggles. He's starting to travel now for the midterms, that anybody can look at it and they can decide that they see exactly what they want to see with him.
So let's talk about that aspect, which is the health. We observe it. We report. You did a detailed job, but the health of the presidency right now. I think the lies about the economy that are different than what people are experiencing reminds me of him saying, I'm perfectly healthy, and the country's sick. The depravity in the files that were released in the Epstein files. We know it was only a partial release, but the way it's been handled, the maligning of the victims, even the way he responded to the question of Caitlin Collins, you're a young woman, why aren't you smiling? Because she's asking you a question about young girl sex trafficking. That's why she's not smiling when she's asking you the question, and seeing 38,000 references to him in this, in these files. And he doesn't come up with any explanation other than, I didn't know the guy. And we're like, you did know the guy, and you're not being honest with it. So we're seeing the sickness of all these other factors now, and all these lies. There's like a confluence of them right now. And I've never seen anything like it in any of my study of politics, going back to when I really recall, with Clinton growing up. I mean, what are you observing? I mean, you're the expert.
There was one really striking moment for me in the Oval Office when I was with him. And I was asking him about the bruising on his hands. And he claims that the bruising on his hands comes from the fact that he takes way too much aspirin. Just like he's supposed to take a baby aspirin a day, but he takes, a grown-up aspirin a day. Doctors are telling him not to do it. It makes him bruise very easily. When he shakes hands, that makes his hands bruise because he's taking so much aspirin. And he said, my doctors don't want me to do it, but, I've been doing it forever. And look at me, I'm in the Oval Office. Like, why change? Like, why change anything? And I feel like that kind of is Donald Trump in a nutshell. He's done things his way, and it has worked out for him. He is the president of the United States. People are constantly telling him, do things differently. And he says, no, I'm going to do it my way. And it's proven correct for him, if you think of it that way. And so he forever has been under the impression that if he says things loud enough and often enough, people will believe it. My health is perfect. The economy is amazing. Immigration is going perfectly. In this moment right now, it seems not to be working for him. His polling numbers have slipped. The midterms seem to be going in Democrats' direction. He's being referred to as a lame duck president by pundits now, which is something that usually happens in the third year of your final term as a president. He still is doing the same thing, where he is forcefully saying everything is perfect. And I think we're not going to see him change, even if his inner circle were to tell him, look, you gotta change up how you're messaging this, because he'll say, I'm in the Oval Office right now, and you're not president. I got to be here. And so I just think he's gonna run this thing the same way he's always been doing it, regardless of whether it's working out for him or not.
Wow. Why do you think he chose you to do this interview? Like why people know that you're fair, which he doesn't usually like people who are fair. You're not going to cover something up. I mean, if you looked at your past work, you would see someone who would be observant and who would write what they see. Why do you think you were picked for this?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. First of all, I told them that I was writing this story, right? I went to the White House and said, one of the biggest questions in America right now is the president's health. Everybody thinks they know how he's doing. Half the internet thinks he's going to die tomorrow. Half the internet thinks he's going to live forever. I'm here to try to clarify the picture. And so the only people who truly know are the president, his inner circle, his doctors. Give me access to whoever you can. I'm going to talk to my own list of people, of course. I'm not only going to talk to the people that the White House provides, but I'd like to be able to, in addition to my own list, talk to the people that you think really know the answer so I can clarify the picture. And because I was doing that and because I was going to write it no matter what, I think it was like, okay, who's the best advocate for the president? He thinks it's himself. Let's give him the opportunity to talk. I think there's that. I think Donald Trump also cares about magazines. New York Magazine, in addition to just being an awesome magazine, was a very important magazine when he was coming up in New York City in the 80s and 90s. It covered him. He understands it. He knows it. He knows the power of glossy magazines. And, he's always sort of liked it. He's sort of kind of stuck in the 80s and 90s, in that way. I think magazines are still incredibly important right now, but he has this idea of what it was. And I think, he doesn't necessarily read that much. And so I doubt he read my past work.
Have you heard from him or the White House since the article in any way that you're able to share?
So I heard from them, it wasn't in an on-the-record kind of way. I think I can fairly say that there were parts of it they liked and parts of it they didn't like. Donald Trump did threaten to sue the ass off of New York Magazine if I wrote something that he hated, and he has not sued the ass off of New York Magazine. I don't know if that speaks to much beyond the fact that he often is making threats that he doesn't follow through on.
Last question before we go. One of the parts that really stood out was when he was pointing to his head and couldn't come up with the word Alzheimer's. And we've heard from his nephews, Fred Trump III, and his niece, Mary Trump, and others about the family history of Alzheimer's. And we've heard stories, at least, of Fred, his father, taking these cognitive exams. And we've seen the cognitive exams through some of the lawsuits that the estate filed. And Fred took all these cognitive exams and was in denial. And there's stories about Fred showing whether this is just lore or the truth. I'll just give you that proviso that they would set up a fake office for him and then act like he was working throughout the day. So he felt a sense of purpose. It seems that family history weighed heavily on Donald in the interview, or that's at least in the back of his mind, this family history of Alzheimer's and cognitive issues that hit hard, really starting right around the age that he's at now.
Yeah, the president does not exercise. He doesn't really believe in it, and he does not eat well. And he claims to be in incredible health, and he says it's because he has perfect genetics, basically. And in talking about that, and I talked to Mary Trump, Donald Trump's niece, for this story, and did get into the fact that Fred Trump had Alzheimer's and that it was, a problem for him late in life. And so when President Trump was talking about his genetics being perfect, I was curious whether that would come up at all. I was prepared to bring it up on my own, but the president did himself. He said, look, my dad had a perfect heart that couldn't stop beating. He had no health problems. He did have one problem, though. Late in life, he had what do you call it? And he pointed to his head. And Caroline Leavitt, who was there, said Alzheimer's. And the president said, yeah, an Alzheimer's thing. But, I don't have it. I'm not saying that the president has Alzheimer's at all, but it was a very striking moment for me because, of course, not remembering the word Alzheimer's does kind of stand out in an interview, but also because in talking about his perfect genetics, he did kind of have to admit that there was one thing that could be seen as not perfect in his family history. And so I do wonder if it weighs on him, if it's a thing that he thinks about. He says he doesn't think about it because I think the quote was, whatever happens, whatever. But it's something that, I'd have to imagine comes to his mind every once in a while, like it would anybody with a family history of that.
Ben Terris, thanks so much for joining us. Author of incredible report in New York Magazine on Trump's health and great writer in general. Ben, any podcasts or anything that you're hosting or anything you want to plug before we go as well, and just in addition to New York Magazine?
I'm just going to plug New York Magazine. It's the best magazine in the world. My article's on newsstands now. Pick it up. It's just we got to support good writing and good reporting right now. The journalism is it's struggling. So the more people buy New York Magazine, the better.
Ben Terris, everyone. Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.